Welcome everyone to the Audit Committee, Governance and Audit Committee, the first of the new team. I'll start the meeting by reading all the housekeeping information, and then I'll hand over to Lisa Lane in Legal for the first appointment. Okay, just to confirm that this meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website. That would be except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and audios that those individuals present and or speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website, which is www.caerphilly.gov.uk. If you lose connections, committee services are here to help. They'll do their best to get you back and reconnect. Can I also remind you all, I'm sure I don't really need to, keep your microphones on mute and your cameras on, and use the hands up function if you want to speak. Okay, we'll go on to agenda item 1 now, which is to appoint a chair and vice chair. I'll hand over to Lisa Lane. Lisa, please.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. I'm here at the meeting this afternoon to deal with item 1, as Councillor Sargent said, to deal with the election of a chair for the Governance and Audit Committee for the forthcoming year. Please could I ask members for nominations?
I nominate Margaret Sargent.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Can I ask for anyone to second that nomination, please?
Yeah, I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. And are there any other nominations? No. Right, can I ask members, rather than use the forms for this particular item, could I ask members please to use the hands up function in chat to vote in favour of Councillor Sargent as chair for the Audit Committee for the forthcoming year? I'm pleased to say, members, Councillor Sargent is duly elected as chair of the Governance and Audit Committee. Congratulations, Councillor Sargent. Can I ask you to take over now the conduct of the meeting and obviously the election of the vice chair?
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you everyone for your support. We'll now go on to the election for the vice chair, which is has to be the lay member. And so I would not nominate Nigel Yates.
Yeah, second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I have everyone's support, please, with the hands up function? Becca, can I ask, is that everyone, please?
Yes, Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Nigel, again. Team.
Thank you, everybody. I'll try and do my best.
Team 1. Right. Next on the agenda is apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Mike Adams, Councillor David Hardacre, Cabinet Member Mrs. Leonard Stenner, and Corporate Director Ed Edmonds. Oh, sorry, and Sue Richards from Head of Improvement Planning and Strategy.
Oh, well.
I don't know if there are any other apologies that I'm not aware of.
Hope they're not in Portugal.
Just
John.
apologise again, Mark.
Yeah, thanks,
John,
Chair.
wish to speak?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Yes, unfortunately, I'm double booked for the latter part of this meeting, so I'm not apologising now, but I'm apologising for later. So at about 3:15, if we haven't completed the meeting, then I'm going to have to depart. So Sorry about that.
Thanks for letting us know. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and a Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Nigel, may I ask, have you had anyone that have indicated for a declaration of interest?
Julian got his hand up. I don't know if.
Julian Simmons, please.
Yes.
Yes, thanks, Margaret. It was just going back to the previous item, just to say those apologies. I couldn't get to the pre-meeting. That's all. Okay, but obviously here now.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you
Okay,
very
all
much,
right.
Julian.
Thanks, Nigel.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you.
I got no other hands up, Margaret.
Oh, thank you. No declarations of interest, so we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is to approve and sign the minutes.
Could I do an attendance?
Oh,
Could I
of
do an
course,
attendance?
of course. Thank you very much.
If I just run through the names, and if you say you're here or not, and then anyone that hasn't said anything, can they let me know? Okay.
Yes.
So we'll have Councillor Aldworth.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Gale.
Present.
Councillor Mann.
Present.
Councillor Miles.
Present.
Councillor Parry.
Present.
Councillor Ridgewell.
Here.
Councillor Sargent.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor G. Simmons.
Yep.
And myself. As any members' names I haven't read out?
Myself, Nigel. Councillor Julian Simmons.
Okay, Julian, thank you for that.
Okay, thanks.
That's the full list of members that are in attendance.
Thank you. Can I ask officers to introduce themselves as they give their reports, please? Okay, we're now on to whatever I said, sign the minutes for accuracy. And in relation to minute number 8, I've asked Deb Gronu to come in here to give an update on the recruitment. Okay, let's go. If I go page by page for accuracy, and if you want to stop me as I go along, that's fine by me. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5.
Chair, is it okay for me to give you the update now?
Yes,
to
of
that
course.
item? Lovely, thank you. Yes, it's just to give you a very brief update to the members of the committee regarding progress on filling the vacancies within the team. We are interviewing this week and early next week, and hope to fill 2 of the vacancies.
Oh, thank you very much, Deb. Thank you.
That's okay, thank you.
Next page is page 9. Oh, sorry, page 6. Good start. Is everyone in agreement with this? Any comments? Colin?
Thanks, Chair. It was just the, sorry, I'm not on the right page, but it's the reference to the fact that we were getting a large number of items on the agenda, and we're having this extra meeting as a result of that. But it doesn't seem to have reduced the number of items on the agenda, and it does unfortunately put pressure on members not to consider things maybe as thoroughly as they would do, thinking there are several items to go and will we get through it all, etc. So I don't know whether any officer's got a comment on why we've got a large number on again. I'm sure we'll be told that they're all necessary, but and I'm not sure if there's any other answer to it, but we don't seem to have altered from last time.
Can I ask Steve Harris?
Yeah, I wasn't actually present at the last meeting, but just an observation from me. Maybe the way to deal with this is to set the parameters that we do for scrutiny committees, where we have 4 main agenda items. And it's slightly different approach in audit at the moment because we're including all the information items in the pack as well. So I'm wondering, moving forward, just a suggestion for you to consider whether we have the Audit Wales update as a standing item, because I think that's important that you get that. If we then limit the main agenda to 4 items, the same as the scrutiny process, and maybe then we put the information reports on the members portal, the same as we do with the scrutiny ones as well. So that's a suggestion from me about making it more manageable moving forward, and I'll hand that over to you to consider.
That certainly sounds like a way forward, Chair. As Steve said, that's mirroring what we do in scrutiny, and there was a lot of debate in scrutiny committees before it happened, wasn't there? But it does seem to have largely worked, I think. Well, I would think it's certainly worth a try, Chair. I don't know what everybody else thinks, obviously.
Well, it has been mentioned at our pre-meeting that it's not necessarily the number of items, it's the length of the reports. So if you've got 3 or 4 items that are going to take 10 minutes, that could include far more reports. So I think that needs to be thought through. Teresa. Oh, sorry. Nigel, who's first, please?
I think John Ridgewell.
John Ridgewell, was
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to say that if Colin was proposing that, I'd second that as a reasonable way forward. It does work with the other scrutiny committees, and I don't really see a reason why it wouldn't work here. But I'm guessing that there's a debate to be had about that, isn't there?
Okay. Who's next, please, Nigel?
Teresa Parry.
Can't you?
You're on mute, Teresa.
You're on mute.
Becky, will you send Teresa a note, please?
You're on mute, Teresa.
Oh, very sorry. I was a word of caution, really. I'm in agreement with what's been proposed, except that next year the Audit and Governance Committee is going to be made up of a lot of lay people, and they will not have access to our portal if it's the councillors' portal that we're referring to. So I don't know how we're going to get around that. Perhaps Steve could come back with that, and perhaps see if we could work something out there.
Yeah, I just think maybe for this year, if we go with what I proposed, if you're happy with that. Obviously, if the number of reports that need to be considered building up, we can discuss then which ones to prioritise. And maybe thinking in the longer term then, Councillor Parry, we can think about how we would get the information reports out to lay members. But, I can consult committee services on that, and I'm sure there'll be a way to make that work.
Yeah, well, then I would be in agreement with what's been proposed. Thank you, Steve.
Lisa, you would like to come in. Lisa Lane.
Yes, Councillor Sargent, just to mention, the information item agendas are available on the committee.
Oh, she's gone.
Yeah, perhaps we're going to have to take our cameras down. Things have frozen.
It's normally the
Sorry,
camera.
Lisa, I didn't hear a word of that because you froze.
Sorry, there are information item pages on the committee documents webs page. So information items are on the internet, on the council's website.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Colin.
Yeah, sorry if I'm happy to make that into proposal. I think John said he would second it. But again, in the another thing we may have to consider is the frequency of meetings. I'm not looking for any more meetings, but I mean, if they are genuinely that many items that we can't fit them in, obviously we will need to look at how many meetings we have, really.
Well, that's being discussed, isn't it, Colin? From where we're going to have hopefully 4 meetings plus the financial statement meeting plus 1 extra, and perhaps we should formalise that to know exactly where they are. Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chair, as part of the forward work programme, we can include a list at the bottom of items that have not been scheduled. And clearly, if that list starts to grow, then that might demonstrate that we would need to put an extra meeting in the diary, but we can keep you up to date on that.
Okay. How did the committee feel about the suggestion? Are we all in agreement? Could we have hands up, please? Nigel, oh, it's okay. Do you wish to speak, Nigel? Because you're... No, it doesn't matter.
No, I think he's voting, isn't he?
Yeah, I was thinking it was something else, Colin.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So that's to the future. Now, about the rest of the rest of this agenda item, we need to vote on this. Oh, Teresa.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to lower my hand.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Still trying.
Right, we're on. We should all be able to vote now. The forms are all in front.
Oh. Oh. Oh.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, can I add my vote, please? Nigel Yates.
Thank you, Nigel. Right, we're on to agenda item 5 now, which is the forward work programme. Now, Deb is taking this.
No, can I take this one, Chair, if that's okay?
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
you're
sorry.
quite right.
We populated the forward work programme now through to October. Looking at the 20th of July, if we're going to follow the sort of protocols that we just agreed, that we'll have 4 reports, then we were going to suggest, because there's 5 on there at the moment, but the anti-fraud strategy, due to work on other priorities, we were going to recommend that we bring that through in October. So if you're happy with that, that will give us the 4 substantive items then for the July committee. We've populated the details then for the special that we have every year on the accounts, and they're standard items that will be presented to you. And then at the moment, we only have the update from Audit Wales in October. So if we put the counter fraud strategy on there, and then when we come back to you at the next meeting, we'll try and populate that. And also, as I indicated earlier, we'll include a list of items that are still to be scheduled. So if the Governance and Audit Committee is happy that we move the anti-fraud strategy from July to October. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions, please? No? Okay, can we have a vote then? Nigel? Question?
So sorry, Chair, just to be clear, are we voting that we accept the forward work programme with my suggested amendment?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
The doings box hasn't come up.
Hi, Chair. Could you take this one by a show of hands, please?
Okay, thank you.
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. If you could lower your hands, please. Agenda item 6. Update from Audit Wales. Gareth Jones is with us this afternoon. Hello, Gareth.
Hello, Councillor Sargent and members of the Governance and Audit Committee. Conscious of timings, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to consider the work programme update. As we said in our meeting in April, we would be providing this to you so you can track the progress of our work programme through the year. So audit of accounts is, the planning is underway, and that is obviously all lined up in the forward work programme to take forward into consideration of the financial statements later on in the year that is already in the forward work programme. As you'll see, the 2 reports delivering good governance and financial sustainability are scheduled for presentation at the 20th of July meeting. We will be publishing our letter later this month around the Council's approach to recovery planning. Our local risk-based work is still under consideration between ourselves and Council's senior management team. We are looking at producing something nationally, so we'll deliver the Springing Forward project across all 22 councils in Wales in the autumn and spring of 21-22. That's in the planning at the moment. And in terms of assurance and risk assessment, we are focusing on those 5 areas in the report, including financial position and also the implications of the Local Government and Elections Act 2021. Just wanted to highlight to members the report at the end of the update, which focuses on our recent national reports. There is a report around local authority discretionary services. In that report, we haven't made any recommendations for local councils. We've set out the position nationally, but I think some of the key points coming out of that report are that the pandemic offers an opportunity to reevaluate the role and value of local government, which has been reinforced through the provision of essential services, protecting both people and communities. But the challenge now for local councils will be to apply the lessons from the pandemic and use it to refine, adapt and deliver further improvements in order to create positive change and remain relevant to all their citizens. We have submitted the report to the council, and I know that that's being actively considered within the scope of the transformation programme that's ongoing at the moment. So more than happy to take any questions that members may have on the update, but I just wanted to pull out those salient points.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Nigel, can you tell me who's the questioners, please?
Yes, Councillor Liz Aldworth.
Thank you.
Thank
Liz.
you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, Gareth, can I just refer to page 15? What's the page 15? 29, is it? Maybe I'm getting muddled up now. It's in relation to assurance and risk assessment, page 15.
Yeah.
And you mention in the under in progress, ongoing discussions around local risk-based projects. What are you referring to there, please? I inquire.
Certainly, Councillor Aldworth. Through our assurance and risk assessment process, we're assessing the risk and the assurances around the council putting in place effective arrangements to deliver value for money. And Councillor Ridgewell, as member of the Cabinet, was part of the presentation that we did recently, where we presented a range of options and a range of service areas that we may wish to consider undertaking some local risk-based work. around that. So one of the areas which we put forward included performance arrangements in light of the Local Government and Elections Act, and to potentially, and I do stress the word potentially, look at the arrangements that the council has in place. What we're looking to do is to get an agreement between ourselves and the council around the work that we would be undertaking in those areas, and to look to the best time to undertake those works. Now, those discussions are still ongoing. We are meeting with senior officers in the next few weeks, and potentially we will have a further update around what the scope of any local risk-based work may be in the meeting in July. So at the moment, we have a range of options on the table, and as you can imagine, we're looking at when the timing might be and what the actual focus of those local pieces of work. So in the past, we've done some work on environmental health, we've done work on safeguarding, we've done work on leisure services and the sport and active recreation strategy. So it would be in those areas.
Thank you. The other question is on your report, is down near 5.17, and that is in relation to a payment industry card. Can you tell us about this something that obviously our staff use? Can you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Councillor Aldworth, I think that particular point falls into a different report on the agenda, so I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
I do apologise, Martin. I've obviously put it in the wrong area of my notes. Thank you.
It's okay, Liz. That's okay.
Councillor Colin Mann has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Nigel. Gareth, you on the performance audit work, a couple of pages in, talked about delivering good governance. Well, unless we just changed it, that is due to go to this committee in July. But the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act report completed in November 2019. So it's what, 18 months ago, yet to be presented to scrutiny. Now, it's possibly not a question for you, but it's certainly a question for somebody as to why it's taken so long to get that into a scrutiny committee.
Councillor Mann, thank you for the question. I think and I can see that colleagues from the offices, so I think my observation on that would be that obviously the report was finished in November 2019, and obviously there is a time lag in terms of reports then coming in front of committees, and obviously then the pandemic has hit, and it will be for the council to decide when items are put forward. The perspective I would give is that there is that the learning from that report has already been taken account of by the council in the updates that we've received since that report was published. So we're assured that the activities and the actions from that report have already been considered. I wouldn't say that so it may be that officers want to come in and comment on that, but I'm assured that the actions that we've identified have been taken forward.
Okay.
Can I ask Ross Roberts to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to pick up on Gareth's point. The report went to Health and Social Wellbeing Scrutiny in after November, so around January, February time. I haven't got the exact date to hand. An action plan was developed, and a lot of the actions have now been superseded, but I just want to give you the assurance that it did go through that process. There was some discussion about what was the best committee, safeguarding board, health and whether it goes to P&R, but eventually that's where it landed in the health and social or social services scrutiny, and a lot of the actions have been addressed. But there'll be an update on that when the register comes to you next month, because it was on the the proposal register that's down in the work committee for next month. So in July you'd have a far more thorough update.
Thank you,
thanks,
Ros.
Chair. Obviously, Rose's update has put an entirely different slant on the situation. And it appears that maybe the audit report, the auditor's report, needs to be amended in that case.
Thank you, Councillor Mann, and we'll update that. And what we'll do is we'll take that item out of the update now subsequently as that's been reported through.
Okay, thanks everyone.
John Ridgewell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks, Gareth. I was interested in the point that you made about discretionary services. I think that was towards the end of your presentation, really, and the recognition of the importance of these, particularly in light of the pandemic, you know, how critical these have been in supporting our communities. But there will be a budgetary implication from this, inevitably. I just wonder what your view might be from an audit perspective on the implications of that.
Thank you, Councillor Ridgewell. That's a really important question, obviously one that all councils are currently grappling with in terms of looking at the discretionary services that they do provide. And obviously that is a choice in terms of the services that each council decides to provide above and beyond the statutory obligations that it has. What we would be looking for in terms of the delivery of discretionary services is obviously the tie-in to the wellbeing objectives within the council, so that your discretionary services help to contribute towards those wellbeing objectives. And obviously we would be looking for how the council is delivering value for money through its discretionary services. Those would be some of the approaches that we would be looking for. But again, the actual decision on which discretionary services each individual council wishes to pursue and deliver have to sit rightly with the elected members who take those decisions. We'd be looking at some of those principles around value for money, connection into strategic planning. And also there's a wide range of other perspectives within the report, but those I would draw out as two of the key elements.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Chair. Yeah.
Nigel, is Teresa next?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. The Welsh Government has given the 500 million, well, I presume has already been given the 500 million additional fund, you know, as a hardship fund. Will you be reporting back on how the council will be using their allocation of money?
Thank you, Councillor Parry. In terms of so are you talking about the specific hardship fund for additional costs and lost revenue?
Yes.
That's certainly covered off. We're currently completing the clearance of the financial sustainability report, and obviously, as you would imagine, it covers the year 2020-21, and obviously that is a key part of the funding that the council has received during 2021. We're currently in the process of clearing the report. The final financial details of that will be presented in that report when it comes to the committee in the 20th of July. So you'll see that. You'll see the figures that we've agreed with the key officers, and I can see that the Section 151 officer has also indicated that he wants to come in. But from my perspective, that's where we are. We will be setting that out, and you will see that for all councils across Wales when you read all the 22 reports. And we've obviously done that previously in our national summary that we produced to you in October of 2020 as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. Stephen.
Yeah, just a couple of points from me briefly. That funding, the way it's used is actually determined anyway by Welsh Government. They set the parameters for the fund. So there's only certain additional costs that we can claim and certain types of income losses. Just for your information though, the provisional revenue budget outturn report for 2021 is currently scheduled for Cabinet later in June. And that report will work its way through into council, and that will have some detail in there around how much we claimed through the fund in the last year. And as I said, the parameters have already been set moving into the new financial year by Welsh Government, but in budget monitoring reports, we will provide updates in due course on that as well.
Lovely. Yeah, I gather it's to do with schools as well and catch up for the education side of things. That's why I was so interested. Thank you, Steve.
Nigel, you wanted to ask a question earlier. It's no? Okay.
No, sorry, no.
That's okay, that's okay. Colin Mann.
Thanks, Chair. It's the recovery planning a bit. And it's nice to hear, Steve, that Welsh Government are micromanaging again, but that's a different subject. The feedback letter that you provided, and I see there's another one to be issued later this month on the recovery planning side of it. Apologies if I've forgotten, but I don't think that's come to this committee. I don't know if it's likely to, and whether the second letter is likely to you know, for the well, for the benefit of us having a look at it anyway.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Mann. What we've tried to do in terms of the recovery planning is we tried to be a little bit more agile as we've been doing this, and officers on the call will be aware of the discussions that we've had over the months since the council launched its strategic recovery framework and its transformation programme. We've been feeding back in observations and try and summarise those at points in time. Now we're completing the letter this month for the second letter, and then looking perhaps to come to you with a summary of those issues that we've identified later on in the summer. So whether or not those letters come before the committee, I suppose, in light of the conversation about number of items on the agenda, will be something I think for the committee to resolve, rather than necessarily ourselves as Audit Wales saying that you must take that. You've obviously had a discussion about the number of agenda items that you receive. So I think that one has to be for you as a committee, Governance and Audit Committee, to resolve.
And are you working on a standard set of criteria for across councils in Wales, or are they sort of tailored to each one?
We've got, thanks, Councillor Mann. We have a standard question that we're looking for, which is looking at whether or not recovery processes are planned efficiently, economically and effectively. But obviously the way in which each council is undertaking recovery from the pandemic has to be tailored to local need. And obviously we're looking at it from the Caerphilly perspective of the actions that the council is undertaking, and trying to track that through quite carefully so that we can evidence and assure and explain what the council is doing when we provide the feedback letters and potentially a feedback summary later on in the summer.
Right,
Although I would just to come back, Councillor Mann, I would just just add one small point, that I think that recovery from the pandemic is not necessarily the same as recovery from a flood or other disasters, and that it's not one that is necessarily a time-bound piece of work. As you can see from our assurance and risk assessment work for 21-22, we are also incorporating recovery planning into that work as well, because we understand that this isn't something that will be completed by July, September 2021. It's something that will be ongoing and evolving over a number of years. So we will keep that under review, but we are trying to provide some early insight into the recovery planning at this point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Gareth, please? No. Okay, thank you very much for the report, Gareth. And as this report is just for noting, can we move on to the next agenda item, please? Which is update on tracking. Audit report recommendations. Can I ask Deb to give this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Yes, this report is basically to give you some information on how we track our recommendations and progress that we've made on implementing the recommendation in the External Auditor's ISA 260 report. So it's quite a long report. So if you're happy, I'll just pull out the highlights for you.
Yeah.
So as I said, the ISA 260 report 2018 suggested that we needed to put in a recommendation tracker so we could effectively monitor progress against recommendations that were made in our individual audit reports to officers and service areas. So we procured a system which was installed in May 2019. It's quite a long process because we had to embed our audit universe and allow our audits to actually take place in order to go through the process of completion in order to raise the recommendations. Well, we were on track with that, and then the pandemic happened. So we're now back on track with that. So we have been using the system now for all our audit work since it was implemented, which was early 2020, was implemented in full. And this is basically the first report really to tell you how we're doing with our recommendations, how many we've issued, and what status they are, and also what risk rating they are. So a couple of things I'd like to draw your attention to here. If you look at paragraph 5.10, that shows you of the number of recommendations that we have issued, that the majority of them are medium risk. There's a number of high risk and a number also of low risk, or we call them merits attention, really. It's just our nomenclature. And also then the table below just gives them the actual numbers and percentages. The other thing we're able to do within our system is to report on their status. So I've got a table and a little chart. Now, I'm sorry if you might find this confusing. We've got a lot of different statuses, but as there's none in those statuses, I've only included in the table the ones that are actually got figures against them. So at the moment, we've got a small number that are accepted by management, obviously just because we have to go through a process of issue the draft reports, get them accepted, and then there's usually a future date, and then hopefully those recommendations are achieved by that date. Some are completed, which is good. We've got quite a few that are draft, which means that we've raised the recommendations within our audit, which is in draft, and may or may not have been issued out to management at this point. And then there are also some which have been issued out, which are in progress, but haven't reached their completion date. And again, the table below just lets you know how those are by the different types as well. So just basically repeats the fact that we've got, most of them are medium rated report recommendations. So basically this to conclude, the audit report is to inform you really of where we are with the recommendations, and to ask you to consider what information you would like from us now in future to develop the information you're getting and help you do your role as audit committee. So can I invite some questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Deb. Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Deb. In 7.5, you mentioned that you had problems with the system when you were rolling it out. Was that because you said it was bought in 2019 when probably that was when it was developed, or?
Oh no. It's complicated, IT related. But anyway, my colleagues in IT have resolved this for us now, and it's all functional. What we're doing, we haven't fully rolled it out to all the schools yet because of I wouldn't say it's complicated, but it's just a different way of doing things. So what we're planning to do is we're doing this manually at the moment, but we're going to get some training, and as our audit reports are issued out, we'll train the users so they know what they're doing. They can log into our portal and they can update the recommendations themselves, rather than have to email back and forth and for us to spend time updating them. It will just generate some efficiencies in the longer term. So, but yeah, there aren't any IT issues now, basically.
Another question I have is, how do you assess the risk element of each item?
Right. Well, we did a report in October, oh gosh, was it 2018? I think it might have been, on our risk rating, our findings, and our conclusion opinions on our audit reports. So basically, low risk is something that's quite, well, obviously low risk. It's not going to materially impact on the system. It's not a safeguarding issue. There's no financial loss. There's no loss of any equipment or assets. It's just a nice to improve sort of issue. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got a high risk issue. So if we make a finding and it's a high risk point, that's usually something, it could be a safeguarding issue, actual loss or theft of cash or assets or property, or a real risk of loss. And then the medium ones, as you can imagine, tend to fall in a spectrum in between those. And as you can see, our actual results show that the majority of our findings are medium, which I think you would really expect that I think it would be quite worrying if we were going out and we were identifying a lot of high risk findings. I mean, you might find that you just have one high risk finding in among a lot of medium, or you may just only find one. It's hard really to say because every audit is different, but yeah, if you really want a little bit more detail, I can refer you to that report, or I can send you a copy if you're having difficulty accessing it.
So the other question I got asked, sorry to
that's
you about
fine.
this, but the chart that is valuing each, what is it? Yeah. Is it valuing the actual objective that you're tasking with, or is it the result of that?
No, it's the finding.
It's the finding. So
it's the finding.
It's risking the finding. So you don't risk assess that until you actually get the results of the report, is it?
Each individual finding is given a risk rating in its own right. So each finding will stand alone, and each recommendation will arise from each finding, and this is what we're reporting here. Then collectively, the findings are assessed in light of the actual audit to come to a conclusion. Now that's referred to later on this agenda in our outturn report, where I give you a little bit more information on the actual opinions of the audit. But in general, what I might do is, if you've got at least one high risk, then you really need to improve. So that's really our need of improvement. And then where you've got medium risks, you can be effective with opportunity to improve. So that's how it all sort of adds together. So it's like building blocks, really. Each finding stands in its own right, but then they collectively inform the opinion that you actually give on the audit exercise that you're undertaking.
So is it a reflection of how well you're doing a job, or how badly the business is doing?
Well, I don't know. I mean, nothing gives me greater pleasure actually to go out to do a report and actually have no findings, because that means that I mean, luckily we're not paid by findings.
Not yet. No.
No, but you know, it's all equally as valuable, because you know it is providing management assurance. But on the other hand, you know, if we do find areas of weakness, then I think it's good. You know, we're obviously contributing to the continuous improvement agenda that the authority is on. And you know, we play our part there as well. And then obviously we've got the risk and assurance, the contribution to the AGS. So you know, it's a multifaceted exercise, really.
So last question, sorry to hog you, is a new system, and you find it quite good or very good?
It's very, very useful. It's very, very powerful. There's a lot of information in there. And when I would say that we're using it, but it's got a lot more potential to inform us on findings, trends. We can delve down to granular level on because we could take 100 schools and look for findings on one particular aspect. It allows us to do that. It's a lot more flexible than the manual system that we had previously.
So we're going to look forward to some interesting reports in the future.
Well, I can't promise that, but we do our best.
Yeah. Okay. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Stephen, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on one point that Deb made, really. She referred to the report that was presented to the committee, we think back in 18, we'd have to check that.
Yeah.
But I can remember it, and there was quite a detailed assessment of how we do the risk ratings, how we arrive at the opinions. So given the fact we do have some new members on the committee as well, I think it'd be a good idea if Deb circulates that by email to all of you, because we will be bringing through further update reports, and I think it'd be good for you to have that background and context, and then obviously that will help you in considering the reports that we'll be bringing forward in the future.
Thank you, Stephen. Teresa.
Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Councillor Miles was before me.
Oh,
sorry.
Oh, my apologies. Brenda.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that this is mentioned in 515 anyway about future reports being able to give us overdue actions.
Oh, yes.
I just want to say I think that's really important, and that's the bit of information that I'd really like to do in future in a kind of an exception report way, so that if everything's on track and you can be fine. I don't think I need to know, but I do need to know if something's going off track or taking too long.
Absolutely. And I think that's, again, one of the benefits of this system. Obviously, as each finding is identified and we go through a process and discuss it with management, some are very easy to resolve and immediate. You know, you can put an implementation in place and they're done and dusted. Other things are more complicated and take a longer lead time. And particularly at the moment, the circumstances we find ourselves in, it is a little bit more difficult. So obviously, officers are, you know, have got other concerns. Perhaps meetings are a little bit more difficult to manage. But I'm sure that once things return back to a little bit more normality, we'll really get into the swing of it, and we'll be able to agree, realistic dates. They've got to be realistic. They've got to be achievable, but they've got to be realistic. And again, I mean, it might be that that we think that things should be more immediate, and we may not agree. So there's a lot of development, I think, of this process, but we're at the beginning stage. But I think it's really interesting, and I think we'll be able to provide members with a lot more information, and like you said, monitoring and providing assurances to yourself in order to for you to do your jobs properly. So yeah, good times. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Deb. Nigel, before I get anything else wrong, is Teresa next?
Yes. Hi, Deb. It's just coming back to the previous meeting that we had when the external auditor said really that the recommendation going in and being put into the tracker should cover external and the internal audit findings. I think you were going to go back and have a look at that. I don't think you were very keen on it at the time, but you said you would have a look at it. Have you been able to look at that?
Can I come in that one, Chair, if that's okay?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, again, I wasn't at the last meeting and I would have had a view on that, obviously. But we do actually bring a report through periodically. Ros brings it through, which shows progress against the external audit recommendations. Right. So you do get that report. It is scheduled for next time. I think the point that was also made was that in the external auditor's report on the accounts that you received last year, there were a high number of recommendations following the findings of the audit. It is my intention as well to include that in Ros's report that comes to you next time, so we can give you assurances around the progress that's been made on those as well. And I noticed Gareth's hand is up, so you may want to come in with a comment as well.
Okay. Please, Gareth.
Sorry. Just I think I've clicked both buttons. If you can hear me, I've managed to do that successfully. Just to say that obviously with the implications to the Local Government and the Elections Act 2021 and the enhanced role of the Governance and Audit Committee, recently the Audit Wales has written to the chairs of Governance and Audit Committees about the importance of tracking through and actively considering external audit reports from all of your external regulators and inspectors, and perhaps when the regulators' proposals is presented next time, perhaps it would be useful to include the letter from Audit Wales around that will just provide some context to the already existing mechanism that you have in place in Caerphilly to track those external audit recommendations. So I think that will probably tie that query that was raised at last time off when you see the regulators' proposals report, which the council officers prepare, and also the letter that we've recently issued. And I think if you see those together as a committee, you will get the assurance that you will require.
That's smashing. Thank you very much indeed. That's great.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Stephen. Nigel, is there anyone else, please?
Colin has been.
Colin Mann.
Okay, thanks, Chair. There's some nice pretty colours on page 23. The pretty colour I'm more concerned with is the red one. I'm sure Deb will be surprised about that. I know it's 20%, but it's 51 items. That seems a bit high. I don't know whether you feel it is or not, Deb, but you know, to have well, either the percentage or the sheer number does seem to be a lot of things in a high risk category.
Yeah, well, I think for me to comment effectively, I probably need to get a little bit more context on the individual audits that these relate to, because what you tend to have is you can have a finding which is high risk in itself, but also what you need to do is contextualize that audit within the whole of the council's operating systems, financial, non-financial, etc. So you can have a finding which is high risk, but may not actually be, you know, material or have a huge impact. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be addressed, because each finding stands alone on this. But to give you really any more information, I would really need to get a little bit more context. And that is something that perhaps, you know, we need to develop, or you need to request from us really, with regards to you know, information and how these are reported. So I can see Steve wants to interject as well.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more assurance. I mean, moving forward, you'll be getting these update reports, hopefully on a 6 monthly basis. We'll discuss that in a moment. But I think from my point of view, what would be more concerning, Councillor Mann, is if we had red risks and they weren't being addressed. So obviously the reports that we will bring through will demonstrate what progress is being made, and where sufficient progress isn't made, then clearly you as a committee would want reassurances or more information on that. So I think moving forward, that would be the more important point, is how many red risks are outstanding at a point in time, and we can give you more sort of granular detail then on those.
Okay, thanks both. It's I realise that, you know, there are two items. Is you know, the problem if something goes wrong, and the possibility of it actually happening. Now, apologies if I missed that, but it's really, I suppose, the other item is how likely it is for any of the things to actually happen.
Yeah, that's again, and we obviously we can't check everything 100%. We only do sample checking and cyclical checking. So we won't do everything, every system every year. You know, we do some aspects of the high risk systems, but lower risk systems we perhaps only do on a less regular basis. And also establishments and locations, they might only get an audit every couple of years. So yeah, it's something I think, you know, we've got a lot more information now, and I think it's using the information, and obviously once we've got more information in the, you know, historical information, we can use it to project and make better you know, you've got better data to provide your assurances on. So I think it's something, you know, we just need to monitor and inform you, and obviously, you know, develop as we go along.
So is that chart taken into account those two aspects, or is it So one or the other.
This at the moment is total number of recommendations. This was at a date in April. I had a little look at the system a bit earlier, and I think we're up to about 300 and where am I? 306 recommendations, and I can just call those up now. And we've got 58 high. So we've issued out another 7 high recommendations in that period of time. So if you can see that we've issued out about, say, 50, so actually the percentage is lower. So I think it's difficult to sort of really project anything at the moment because we've only got a limited amount of data.
Steve,
Okay,
can
well,
you come in?
it sounds like we're going to get some more information on it before too long anyway. So
yeah,
thank you. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm conscious we've been on this item quite a long time, but the report that I've asked Deb to circulate does explain how these ratings are carried out. So obviously, if there are any concerns about that, then we could have a discussion on those at a future meeting. But they were endorsed by the Audit Committee, as Deb said, back in 2018.
Yeah, that was a bit I was thinking of, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Now, the recommendations on Deb's report is in 3.1, which is members note the implementation of the Pentana MK system. And 3.2 is the frequency of reporting. Shall we take them both together? Stephen.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just to help you with the vote, I'd just like to suggest that we start by bringing you a 6-monthly update report. So I'm just putting that suggestion to you initially. Obviously, if you felt that needs to be reviewed moving forward, then we could review it.
June.
Lots of questions. Yeah.
June. Can't hear you.
She's on mute.
Sorry, Chair, that was my mistake.
That's okay. Have you a question?
No, I haven't at the moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Nigel.
Yes, could I second that Steve has suggested there, because as it's a new system, there's still a lot of data to go into it, and we don't want to sort of have reports coming off, very soon. We leave it settle down a minute, and then we'll trial this 6-monthly report and see how it goes. And as Steve suggested, then as it develops and we require more reports, then we can ask for them as they go along.
That's fine by me. How do everyone else feel?
Chair, I noticed that Councillor Miles has a hand up.
Oh, I apologise, Brenda. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to propose what Steve had suggested, and Nigel has already kind of seconded it. So 6-monthly
that's
reports.
Good. That's
fine
good.
by me.
Yeah. Shall we go to the vote then, please?
In danger of being unanimous.
It's up on screen now. Well, it's getting there.
Can I give my verbal vote, please, to agree the recommendations? Nigel Yates.
Yes. Thank you, Nigel.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Liz, you'd like to speak?
No, it's an old hand, Chair.
Oh, okay, thank you. Right, we'll go on to agenda item 8, please. And that is you again, Debbie.
Me again. Yeah, thank you. Okay, if you can recall, there was a report presented to the committee by Audit Wales on the national exercise they did called Raising Our Game, Tackling Fraud in Wales. So this really is where we are with Caerphilly in regard to the areas that were identified by that report to give you an update and also to report on any findings, and possibly then if there's anything that needs to be considered for future development. So again, just having a look and picking out basically the main issues. There were 15 recommendations on a number of themes which were raised by the report, and our position regarding those 7 themes are leadership and culture. I think the authority can set high standards for members and officers, and the culture is good. We're planning to develop the counter fraud strategy, which we mentioned earlier on, and the forward work programme. We attend events and participate in working groups. I'm just contacted the Welsh anti-fraud officers, and I think it's the meeting within the next couple of weeks, which I'm going to attend. First time I've attended that group, so that'd be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to that. We log errors and frauds. We keep a log of that within internal audit. We've got a strong risk management and control framework. We've got robust policies and training, data governance. We've got great deal of capacity for fraud, although we haven't actually implemented that completely. As I said, that's under development at the moment. We use a piece of software called AP Forensics, which monitors our payments. I'm glad to say as well that we've just completed a piece of work on some data matching produced by the National Fraud Initiative, and we found no duplicate payments that escaped the AP Forensics tool, so that's really, really pleasing. And that's also mentioned in the section on tools and data as well. We collaborate with the DWP and occasionally with the police if necessary, if we get any issues like that. It's obviously thankfully rare. And like I said, we also collaborate internally between other departments and ourselves, and also externally with other local authorities and other bodies. Reporting and scrutiny, obviously that's the function of yourselves in the audit committee. You consider the effectiveness of the risk management, and my colleague Ros, she presents to yourself on a regular basis regarding that. So really, it's basically whether or not you'd like to note the report and also consider what further action or information is needed to meet the rest of the recommendations noted in the Audit Wales publication.
Thank you very much, Deb. Nigel, do we have questioners, please?
Yes, Councillor Liz Aldworth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've 2 questions really on this item 8. And the one is in connection with mentioned senior officers, but any staff really. Where do we allow instead of taking holidays and carrying them over, do we allow payment in lieu of holidays, Deb?
I think if Steve can answer that one for me.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I had to leave the meeting just for 2 minutes, but I did pick that up.
Sorry.
We don't normally pay excess carryover leave, but members may be aware that due to the exceptional circumstances with COVID, For 2020 only, we did make payment in certain cases, but that was reported via Cabinet and approved by Cabinet. But the normal situation is that the maximum carryover that's allowable is 5 days.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Also, I refer to the policy and training area of the report. And we mention about the payment industry card and the training that staff are expected to do on this. Now, is this payment industry card, is that what we use if we pay council accounts, or is this for, you know, when businesses pay into the council?
No,
what is this?
It's payment industry card security standards is a set of regulations which are issued by our bankers and enables us to accept credit card income from council taxpayers and well, customers really of our services. So it doesn't apply to every member of staff, only those who actually take card income. And there's 12 standards, and majority of them cover IT, capacity, firewalls, passwords, segregation of the network, etc. And there's a small section then which covers sort of admin details, and it's just a awareness training which has got to be distributed to our staff, and basic guidance, for example, you know, over maintaining of data security really, which is embedded in a lot of other aspects anyway. So it's just firming up on already existing guidance and best practice.
So it doesn't concern us members of this committee then, only that you have it in place?
Well, yes, really. It's just something that we have to do. We have to be in compliance with it. And yeah, it's just a task that has to be done in order to maintain that compliance.
Righto, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, I have Brenda Miles.
Brenda, yeah.
Thanks. There are quite a few suggestions in the report, and I think there's none of them that I disagree with. And you know, we've been asked to comment on what further information or actions should be taken. So I'd like to kind of propose that we say that the further actions necessary would be to identify clear roles and responsibilities for countering fraud, and to develop the action plan as is envisaged in the report, so that we can meet the timetable for the recommendations that are being set out in the report. But like I say, kind of there's other things that are in the report that we should capture, you know, that we approve of as a committee. So like embedding it into the organisation, you know, all the things that have been mentioned in the report really, I think, are relevant.
Yeah.
Steve, would you like to come in here?
Yeah, actually, having reread the report before the meeting, I was going to suggest that when we bring the counter-fraud strategy to you, that we also back that up with an action plan, so you can see clearly what actions we're going to take place. You can then endorse that as a governance and audit committee, and we can keep you updated then on progress. So if you're happy with that, Councillor Miles, I'd like to put that forward as a suggestion.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we have one more question, which is Colin Mann.
Thanks, Chair. Deb or Steve, I'm not sure. Obviously, the ideal amount of fraud is nil. What do you feel is an acceptable sort of amount, percentage, or whatever? Because obviously you're not going to cover everything, and there are so many scams.
Nil, really.
Sorry.
I agree with you that there is no acceptable amount, and that every step should be taken within reasonable limits to eliminate it, or at least eliminate the risk of fraud. And sometimes that's a nebulous concept, really, because no one really knows how much fraud there is. We only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. That's a difficult matter. So, but yeah, yeah.
So we could think it's nil, and there's a large amount we don't know about, really.
Well, that's possible, but I think what we need to do then is put in measures, have a robust anti-fraud strategy and other measures to provide assurances that with intolerable confidences that we're reducing the risk as much as we can.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting there is, but I mean it's just we don't, as you say, we don't know what we don't know, do we? I mean the amount of phone calls that come through probably to all of us where people attempting to scam you with this and the other. Well, I think there are thousands of attempts on the internet to hack into the council system. So I mean it's a difficult concept, isn't it, to just to work out, really.
Well, I think you need high levels of vigilance and awareness, and I think it comes down to having a robust strategy and culture.
So really what you're saying is you do whatever you can, and rely on that hopefully is enough to address this situation.
Yeah. Steve,
you'd like to come in here?
Well, yeah, just to back up really what Councillor Mann and Deb are saying, it's about mitigating risk as much as we can, isn't it? But just to assure you, in terms of known losses, they are very low in Caerphilly County Borough Council. And you mentioned, Councillor Mann, obviously, the number of scams that are going on these days, living in a digital world. Well, you will notice from the annual governance statement later that one of the key actions is to develop our cybersecurity strategy. So it's about trying to keep one step ahead and to make sure that the controls that we have in place are as robust as they can possibly be.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Brenda, can I ask you to come back in, please?
Sorry, that's a mistake. I hadn't taken my hand down from before.
Oh, okay. Okay. Can we have comments on Brenda's idea and Steve's the suggestion that we go forward with this proposal? Comments?
Fine with me, Chair.
Stephen.
So yeah, just to be clear then, Chair, what we're saying is that when we bring the cybersecurity, let's go back a step, the counter fraud strategy to you, we will back that up as well with an action plan.
That's right. Everyone's happy with that, are they? Okay, we'll have that as going forward, and the recommendation is to note the Caerphilly's response to the report. The forms is up on screen. If we could have voting, please.
Can I add my verbal vote? That's Nigel Yates.
Yes,
to the
thank
recommendations,
you.
please.
Thank you, Nigel.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Beck. Now, the agenda item 9. Annual Internal Audit Report 2021. Debbie again, please.
Right, thank you. Yeah, me again. Okay. Again, this is quite a long report, and it's got a long appendix. So again, I'll pull out the highlights, but obviously I'll take questions on any of the detail as needed.
Thank you.
So the purpose of the report is to inform the members of the Governance and Audit Committee of the work sections undertaken for the period 2020 to 21. This is to meet the requirements of the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards, our audit charter, the Council's financial regulations, and also to support the annual governance statement, which forms part of the financial accounts. So to do this, we need to give you an opinion on the internal controls of the systems that we've tested, summary of our audit work, and draw attention to any issues that may have impacted on the level of assurance that we can provide you. So our recommendations is that you note the report and our opinion. So as I said, the basis of the report is that we have to provide you with a summary of the work we've done. And so this year, well, basically, let's go back a little bit. Previous years, we would have a detailed plan, which we would have reported to yourselves and reported progress on through the year. But this year being the year it is, and we've had the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a change in our work structure strategy, and we didn't actually do any audit work for a period of time. So as part of that, then we've taken account of some guidance that's been issued by SIPFA, so we've just referred to that as well. But that's really not unusual. The whole of the country has had obviously the same impact. So it's just to basically to just confirm that we've borne that in mind in developing this report. So we've done a full half year since October of our work, albeit that we haven't been able to do any face-to-face audits, as you can imagine. So we've worked remotely, and in order to do that, we've done a lot of self-assessment, remote working, and the other thing that's impacted on us is we've had some staffing changes. So basically, the rest of the report then gives you some information about other audits that we've done on various areas, financial audits. We haven't done much area audit of social services or communities because of the level of risk in those areas. We've concentrated on high risk financial areas. We've also done work on the NFI data matching, which I referred to in the other report that we discussed just a little earlier. And that's given us quite good results because we found no extra duplicated payments that weren't already identified in the AP forensics. As mentioned also earlier in this meeting, we've been using our MK Insights software. We're using that to deliver controlled risk self-assessments in our schools. And we're hoping also to roll that out to other establishments and areas as well. So that tool has been quite useful this year because it's allowed us to do that. So it's been, excellent really to help us deliver our work. As we discussed in the previous report as well, our internal audit reports risk each individual findings, and also the MK Insights is able to evaluate a score for each part of the audit and also for the audit itself. That's a little bit of a blunt instrument because you get, if you've got 100 questions, each yes will get a 1 and each no would get a 0. So you could get a score of 99%, but if your one question or test that was negative was a high risk point, you would still get, you might get a 99% compliance score, but you might still not have a good opinion because the one point that you were finding on was still a high risk item. So it's quite a nuanced approach in actually going from our findings to the score to the opinion, but all these factors feed in to the overall findings of the individual audits. As referred to also here, the 4-tier opinion we have, which is effective with opportunity to improve, in need of improvement and inadequate. So all those factors feed into our overall opinion for each individual audit and then the opinion for the year as a whole. As we've already discussed, this is quite a new way of reporting our findings. It's the first real year now. I know we started in 2019, but I think things have only in very early days, and obviously we had the pandemic. So this is the first really full year we've had of reporting our findings this way. And this will eventually allow us a lot more detail and allow us granular evaluation and identification of themes across audits, audit levels, or even individual tests as we develop it. It also allows us to analyse recommendations, findings by risk across audit types or even service areas. And this is under development, and I think there's a lot of potential there for us to develop this level of information to allow us to report to you further now in future years. As already referred to as well, where findings are reported, we make recommendations to management. They're required to indicate what they're going to do to rectify those points, give us a date and an officer responsible, which we will then be able to put into our tracker, which again we reported on earlier. Also, in line with the SIAS, we also give a direction of travel. So that shows whether there have been improvements or things have stayed the same, or hopefully not, but a reduction in controls over periods in comparison one year to the next. There's a quick summary there as well about other work that we've done. I was involved quite a lot in the early days, beginning of the financial year, in giving ad hoc advice as people began to work remotely and practices were changing. So just to provide assurances of internal controls while those processes were under development. We've done some other work on grants. We're still performing the corporate finance information governance steward role, and obviously that's quite important again with remote working and requirements there for data security. We've done a small amount of final account checks, and we've also supported the £500 carer payment as well, which our colleagues in social services administered. So we gave some assurances on the accuracy of that. I'm also developing, as I think I mentioned earlier, some counter fraud work. So I've been in contact with Welsh Fraud Officers Group. I said they're starting meetings. I've also attended a couple of presentations, the National Anti-Fraud Network and also the Credit Industry Fraud Avoidance Scheme. A little bit more information as well about the MK Audit Universe. So that allows us to map all our audits across all service areas, but it also allows us to give us some information on corporate wellbeing objectives and some fundamental principles of good practice and well, pretty basic good practice. So internal control, governance, risk management, fraud, safeguarding and financial resilience. So we can also map our audit across those areas as well, which will allow us to develop evidence and provide assurance in those areas. So we've got Appendix 1 attached, which gives us a full detail of all our audits, where we are in them, status and the scoring and the opinion. There's a large number of these which we haven't been able to achieve completion on at this point in time because well, we've got some staffing issues, obviously vacancies, so but as you know, we're working towards filling those, and also getting access to officers and meetings to progress those has been a little bit more difficult than in previous years. But we're hoping as things go back to normal now, we'll be able to develop those and we'll be able to get those reports out to completion, and obviously those audits will be concluded. So there will be progress. I would anticipate then when we give you the report now, 6-month report which you've asked for, which will probably be September, October time, whenever that falls into the forward work programme for that date. So really to conclude, really, the internal audit opinion, which I'm pleased to give you today, is that the council systems and control processes are effective, even though there's been a reduced level of audit coverage during the 2021 financial year. We have had impact due to the COVID pandemic and some staffing issues, but not enough to adversely affect the annual opinion. And also, just to give you some assurance, there are now plans in place to overcome those limitations. we're adopting new working practices, we're developing, I said, remote working, control risk self-assessment, maximising the use of the MK system as well to facilitate that. And also we've got a plan in place to fill the vacancies within the structure. So I can invite some questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Any questions, please? No.
It's a simple one. This is, can I assume that OS stands for outstanding?
Oh, standing. I do apologise. Yes.
Yes. I looked everywhere for the. I was thinking possibly is because there's a lot of them. And
yeah, sorry. Yes. Yeah. Perhaps I should do a glossary or a key at the bottom. Do apologise for that.
So when will we need to be concerned about that particular?
Right. Well, we did. We started off a themed review of some schools inventory. Obviously, that was suspended because of the pandemic, and even though schools have been reopened to pupils, we're not attending on site. So that's why those are outstanding. And I think as soon as we've got guidance coming from environmental health and education that we can recommence that work, then we will be able to update those and make some progress. So unfortunately, that really is out of our hands at this point, but you know, we're well aware of that. I think probably what we'll do is we'll go back and revisit those areas and update them rather than issue out an obsolete report, really, because it'll be no use to anyone. So but yeah, my plan is to, as soon as we safely can get those resolved, we will.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. Colin Mann.
Thanks, Chair. Just trying to understand it, really, Deb.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the page where Glingare Primary, Pontyl Price Primary. It's the first or second page, I think.
Yeah, I can see those. Yeah.
You've got the percentages there.
Yeah.
And for example, 66 is affected with opportunity to improve. And 96 has got the same comment. Yeah. I assume the opportunity to improve covers a multitude of different issues, but it was the and obviously there's some which are affected, which are either 100% or nearly 100%.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering how that sort of worked, you know.
Well, this goes back to the explanation I gave a little bit earlier, where
sorry, I had to dip out for a couple of minutes, so
okay.
I probably missed your comment on it.
It's quite nuanced, really, because we've each a school as well might have 5 or 6 different audit areas, and each individual test within that area has got a score. The system just divides every question. But so if there's 200 questions, each question will have half a 1% score. So we preset these questions, and we say whether it's you know, what we'd expecting to be the answer to the question if the controls are all in place. So the system gives you a score, but that doesn't really bring in, as I said, the nuance as to then the findings, as to whether those findings are high risk or medium risk or low risk or merits attention. So that's where you can sometimes have a disconnect, where a high score, so you could have 99%, but if you've got one high risk point, and that could be, I don't know, they don't lock the take-ins away in the safe overnight, then that is high risk, and we would put that one into an in need of improvement category, because you know, everything else really falls into is irrelevant, because we're only interested, because we report by exception as well, we're only interested in the negative points, so the risks. Okay. So yeah, like I said, it's quite nuanced. And I mean, if you think that this doesn't really inform you, we can take the score out and we can just give you the opinion. And obviously, as we give you more information about the number of findings, that will also help you to determine the you know, your assurance as well.
Yeah, as I say, it was the score I was trying to relate to the comment on the end.
Yes, yeah.
Obviously, the comment on the end can cover all sorts of things, as you say. So
Yeah.
I didn't realise there was a connection, but I think I maybe caught the end of that bit. Sorry, the phone rang at the wrong time. Sorry.
Oh, right.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Colin. Nigel.
Yeah, small question. Do you ever review the employment contracts at the schools, particularly the temporary ones?
If there's supply agency contract, they would be picked up through purchase ledger. If they're our employees, then we would be picking them up through salaries, wages, and safer recruitment part of the audit programme.
I was just wondering if when you take on a temporary employee, you can only do that twice for 2 years. If you continue to do that, they have entitlement to become a permanent member of staff.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I think our HR monitor that. I mean, we have looked at that previously, but it's not something we specifically have specifically done an audit on very recently. But we are aware of it, so we would look for short-term contracts. I mean, the risk to us really is someone having a short-term contract and possibly leaving our employment, and the communication not getting to payroll, and they're getting paid after they left our employment. So if someone accrues employment rights where they're legitimately entitled to, then that's not a risk as far as, you know, I think, you know, the head teacher would be managing that, because they wouldn't be appointing someone into to teach a class where there wasn't a need to teach a class. So that at the end of the day, we'll, you know, when we come in and do our audits, there's always an expectation, as you know, with the third line of defence, there's always the expectation that the managers on site would be monitoring that, you know, how the head teacher would be monitoring that themselves. So they wouldn't be, you know, like I said, keeping on a contract for someone where there wasn't the need to. And obviously our colleagues in HR as well. I mean, if there is a reason for someone's employment to be terminated through you know, reduction in numbers, then they would take the appropriate action at that point as well.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Any more questions, please? Oh, thank you, Deb. Thank you for your contribution this afternoon. Can someone move and second the report, please, and then we'll go to the vote.
Move the report.
Thank you.
I second that.
Thank you very much. Can we go to the vote, please?
Can I add my vote, please, Nigel Yates, to the recommendations?
Thank you, Nigel.
We got 100% for.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, we'll move on to the agenda item 10, which is the draft annual governance statement, which is Steve Harris, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present members of the committee with the draft annual governance statement, or AGS for short, for the 2020-21 financial year. The draft document is appended to the report as Appendix 1. And just to highlight a little bit around the process, the document has been prepared by the Corporate Governance Review Panel. And as part of this, the panel considers responses from heads of service, directors, and key officers, and these responses are then incorporated into the document. Work was undertaken to address issues raised in the previous year's AGS, and the panel determined that sufficient progress has been made to address those issues. But you will notice from the document that there are 3 new areas for improvement moving forward. Just to set up what the process is, once the document has been approved by the Governance and Audit Committee, it will then be incorporated into the 2020-21 draft financial statements, and these will be handed over to Audit Wales on the 9th of July for them to complete their external audit. And members will then be aware that the external auditor's report and the financial statements will be presented to the Governance and Audit Committee in September before they finally presented to Council in October this year. In terms of recommendations, Chair, the committee is asked to consider the draft annual governance statement for 2021 and to approve the content subject to any changes agreed. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Have I any questions, please? No? Okay. Okay, can I have someone then? This goes to a vote. So can I have someone to move and second before we go to the vote then, please?
Can I move that we recommend the report, please?
Yes,
I'll second.
Thank
I'll
you both
second
very
that.
much. Thank you, Stephen. Well, can we go to vote, Becca, please?
Can I also add my verbal vote, Nigel Yates, to the recommendation of the report, please?
Thank you, Nigel.
Should be coming up now, Chair. Just a moment.
Thank you.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Beck. That would normally be the end of the meeting, but we do have an information item that's been brought forward by Councillor Miles, and Lisa will help you through with this one, Brenda. Lisa. Lisa?
Yep.
Oh, here we go.
Sorry. Would Councillor Miles like to ask some questions, or would you just like me to introduce the report?
If you could go through to the report, and then perhaps Brenda Miles can ask at the end.
Yeah, that's fine. So this report advises members of the corporate complaints that were dealt with for the period the 1st of April last year to the 31st of March this year. Obviously, it deals with corporate complaints only. It wouldn't deal with service requests or complaints about school or social services complaints by service users. The report compares the number of complaints dealt with for the previous year compared to last year, and the total number of complaints across the authority dealt with last year was 177. Members will see that the report sets out the stage 1 complaints dealt with, which were 161, and sets out then that the number of stage 1 complaints dealt with this year compared to last year's decreased by 82. The report then gives us a short synopsis of the types of complaints dealt with in social services, corporate services, communities and housing. The report then goes on to refer to the stage 2 complaints, which were 53 in total. Of those 53, a number escalated from stage 1 to stage 2. There were 47 ombudsman's referrals, and paragraph 5.9.1 sets out the extent of those referrals to the ombudsman. For target responses, there were 24 target dates not met for stage 1 and 3 not met for stage 2. There was a variety of reasons for not meeting these deadlines, including an administrative error, work pressures, initial impact on the services due to the COVID pandemic. But officers will continue to review the deadlines and ask for extensions where appropriate if it becomes clear that we won't be able to meet the deadlines. Members then will note at 5.11 there was a review of the lessons learnt in the various service areas. So there's examples for corporate services, housing, social services, communities, and then the report refers to the causes of complaint and lists the causes. And then also mentions the vexatious complainants policy and that there have been no referrals under the policy for the last reporting period. So members, the report just asks members to note the report, but if I can answer any questions, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Brenda.
Yeah, so my reason for asking for the report to come forward was really to do with Appendix 2, where we get a breakdown of the complaints according to the nature of the complaint. And the one I'm interested in particular is the one that is described as following council policies and relevant legislation, where there were complaints in the Communities Directorate and Housing Directorate 27 and 25. So they're fairly substantial category of complaints. And I just want to have some more information about those complaints and how they're being dealt with. Who's involved, because they're about policy decisions that are being made by council. I want to understand more about the process that they go through. Who's involved in making decisions about those complaints? I think I've asked the question before about what could the potential outcome of those complaints be, and in general, the answer I got back, I think, was that they're never upheld. There can only be one response, which is that that they follow policy, and that's the end of the matter. But I'm sort of interested to know whether we ever get complaints then that are not down to the policy as such, but maybe the way the policy is implemented or interpreted. And if we've got complaints in that category, what scope is there for anyone who's got a genuine kind of grievance with the way the policy has been implemented? And maybe is there, what is the process by which we could review that policy and modify it in such a way that maybe eliminates any unintended consequences of that policy decision? So I'm really interested to understand more about the process for that particular category of complaints and how they're resolved.
Yeah, no problem, Councillor Myers. I've made some inquiries from the two departments, obviously, earlier today. I obviously don't have a great detail that I can give to you at the moment, but as an overview, that category includes following council policies and legislation. So in relation to the Communities Directorate, there were a number of complaints listed under that category for planning, in relation to following legislation and planning policies. So slightly different, I think, to the question you've asked, because obviously planning departments have to follow planning policies, planning legislation when they follow certain processes, such as dealing with planning applications or building control. So there were a number of complaints listed for those categories. I think you're probably referring to more of the policy type decisions for such as policies and procedures we may have. Housing, for example, I've asked them some questions and they've told me that it's mainly about decisions taken relating to procedures rather than about the policy. And again, housing work is covered by a lot of legislation. So right to buy process is covered by legislation, succession tenancies is covered by legislation. So, you know, there's set parameters they work with. And they tell me that essentially the policies weren't reviewed as a result of the complaints, and the complaints were not upheld in those circumstances. Going back to the communities, I'm aware of one complaint in relating to the street lighting switch off, which was not upheld. So I am aware of that, and I am aware that data is also reported separately. So we have corporate complaints, which works within set parameters of a stage 1 and a stage 2 response. But there are other ways we deal with contacts, which is known as service requests. And I understand this data is reported then to scrutiny committees as a Directorate performance data. So we do have a lot of data, but this mainly focuses on corporate complaints. So in terms of responding to those complaints, officers within the service areas would deal with them. And if they escalate then to a stage 2, then the head of service or a nominated representative would deal with the complaint. If there were to be a change in policy and it required a cabinet approval, obviously the policy would go through the processes to be able to take a report to cabinet to make those changes. Have I covered all your points, Councillor Miles? Was it?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah. I don't get the feeling though that we're, kind of where the decision's upheld then, and they say, well, that's just policy. That's just our policy. That doesn't seem to have an avenue of progression, so that somebody's looking at it. I mean,
I don't have the detail to give you to explain how they've reached the decision to uphold the complaint. Now, I would assume, the policy is robust, and if there are errors or are issues where it's recognised that the policy may need review, then you would assume the complaint would not be upheld, and we would review the policy. So, sorry.
Could I ask Steve to come in here?
Yeah, just a couple of points. This isn't my area of expertise, but I just wanted to build on what Lisa said about the Directorate performance assessments. You all sit on scrutiny committees. It's a new process, as you know, the way we're reporting now our performance and various other data. But there is a section in the Directorate performance assessments that does give an update or on complaints, and it would show there details of any trends that are emerging, etc. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is Lisa mentioned stage 1 and stage 2, which is part of our internal process. But at the end of stage 2, if a complainant is still not satisfied, they can, of course, refer the matter to the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman may or may not investigate that complaint. So I just wanted to add a little bit more context.
Can I chip in here just a minute, just so that I can understand a little better? Brenda, you mentioned when you have a policy, an interpretation of that policy. Does that mean that it can be taken from this side of the tight policy to very weakening end of the policy? I don't quite follow.
I suppose what I'm thinking of
can
is
say something, but it can be interpreted in so many different ways. How can we judge that it's not too one-sided?
This is kind of where I'm coming from, is that we take policy decisions at the level of council or cabinet or whatever. But then it's whether when we start getting complaints, which we're inevitably going to do about that policy, it's whether that information then is getting back to the decision makers. That's where I'm coming from on this, is that if too many complaints are coming in and they're just being our customers are being told, oh, well, that's just the decision that the council has made. What I'm interested to kind of get to the bottom of is, are we really, as a council, as a decision-making body, getting a handle on what people are saying about the decisions we've made? And indeed, in the way that it's implemented, because I'm interested in implementation of policies, because sometimes you can set a policy perfectly logical and a good and robust policy decision is made. But then when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of how that is rolled out,
exactly,
because a policy is a high-level document, isn't it? And then there have to be rules and processes and procedures that kind of underlie that. But can things then start to kind of have unintended consequences that as a council we wouldn't want certain things to apply to people in the way that perhaps they are? and that we want to see a modification made in it. What I'm saying is, like, if we're not as a council getting feedback on the kinds of complaints that are coming in about our policy decisions, are we learning anything from it? If we're never getting any feedback.
Yeah, Lisa may have another comment, but I just want to talk again about the Director of Performance Assessments. They obviously include information on complaints. They're looked at by Directorate Management teams. They're also presented to scrutiny committees. So obviously if there were trends emerging, then the scrutiny committee would be informed of that in the DPA. And they also go to the corporate management team and to cabinet as well. So there's lots of avenues where this information is being shared. So if there are trends emerging, it would be picked up through one of those processes. But Lisa may want to add more from the pure complaints angle.
Just really to add, obviously this report was prepared under, if you like, the old format. Members will recall we adopted a new complaints policy in April, and it may be something that we can discuss as a corporate complaints group when we bring these reports forward, and perhaps, you know, give a synopsis or a bit more information, so we can give some, you know, further understanding as to perhaps say we didn't uphold a complaint on a policy and why we didn't uphold it and how it relates to the policy, and how you know, it's still fit for purpose then, if you like. As Steve said, it can go to the Ombudsman, and you know, the Ombudsman will look at our policy, look at the response we provided, and they'll either say yes, that's fine, or no, have you thought about looking at A, B, C, or you know, actually no, I don't think you've done things properly. So we are sort of checked by the Ombudsman. But I do see what you're saying. You'd like to have a bit more information about why we're not upholding complaints. So we've got procedures in place the housing obviously follow based on their policies. You'd just like to know why they are not upholding the complaints, and are those policies still fit for purpose?
Yeah, and I suppose in terms of the audit committee, I'm just looking for something more, a little bit more information to make sure, so I can be assured that these issues are, you know, being addressed somewhere else, because they're not going to be addressed by this committee. But if, you know, if I knew then that I don't know, 10 out of the 50 complaints had gone forward to cabinet, you know, that might give me some level of assurance that, yeah, that the process is kind of working. And there are some of the complaints, even if there was only one or two, were referred back to cabinet to have a look at the policy and make recommendations for changes, or, you know. Yes, so I know I'm rambling a bit now, but yeah, that sort of information would give me some level of assurance, I think, that we are listening to what people are saying, and there is a process that is in place and is working to address those complaints effectively.
I suppose from our perspective for this report, we focus on the upheld complaints and the lessons learned from those. I think what you're saying, Councillor Miles, is that the not upheld complaints, which may have a policy implication or procedure implication, you just want to know that those not upheld are sort of mirroring the policies, and that they're not perhaps falling by the wayside and don't need a sort of review. Is that right?
I think, yeah, I think you're understanding where I'm coming from. Yeah, is that I don't like to think of our residents being sort of fobbed off, just being told, but that's the policy, and what we're doing is following policy.
Yeah,
I want to be sure that we're getting a fair hearing when we've got a complaint about our policies.
Yeah, I think, you know, they get robust answers, and obviously at stage 1 they'll have their first response, and then a stage 2 would be a head of service or a nominated officer to respond, and then the Ombudsman. So I would like to think our processes are robust, but perhaps it would be useful for us to give you some examples of those. Like I say, we focus on the upheld complaints and the lessons learned. But I do see that, you know, you would like perhaps a more of an overview on that particular point going forward. Obviously, there's lots of categories. There's 11 categories. I don't think we could manage all of the information for all of the categories in the report. It would be pages and pages and pages long, but it may be something that we can look at as a complaints group going forward, and you know, perhaps give our report on upheld and non-upheld complaints examples.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Colin, can I bring you in here, please?
Thank you, Chair. Lisa, you mentioned I think there was one upheld complaint about street lighting, I think you said. Do you know how many there were in total?
Well, that was not upheld, apparently, the street lighting complaint that I'm aware of. But again, this was dealt with under a corporate complaints process. Obviously, I am aware that there are there's other data dealing with street lighting matters that have been dealt with elsewhere and not under the corporate complaints process, which is where the Directorate Performance Assessment reports come in, which would give an overview of all contacts for the particular service areas. Steve might want to come in on that particular matter.
So what you're saying is that, you know, we categorize the complaints, no matter how many we have, it really goes on whether they're upheld or not. And I'd be interested to know the process of them being upheld or not. I mean, and you don't have any knowledge of the street lighting situation at all, do you?
Only what I provided members from the previous audit committees when I circulated some additional information. I would say that each complaint, when it's dealt with as a corporate complaint, is dealt with on its own merits. So, you know, they are looked at individually. We wouldn't just write off a complaint. We wouldn't just look at it and think, oh no, that's just about street lighting. It would be looked at, investigated and responded to on its own merits.
Yeah, it's back to what Brenda said earlier. You know, the council brings in policies. There may be unintended consequences. There may be a huge number of complaints, which there has been in the. I know of something like 260. I think the last figure I was given. It's probably more by now. Yet I have seen a number of responses coming out which are virtually identical. It appears to me that you can call it a tick box exercise. You could call it a total waste of time. And I think a lot of people, a lot of the public, if they're just getting these standard letters, feel what's the point? Why do we bother? Now, we've either got a complaints procedure which somebody takes notice of and does something about, or why bother in the first place? It seems, you know, we spent a lot of time on it now. A lot of the members of the public spend a lot of time on it, and it appears to be getting us nowhere.
Yeah, the committee will be aware we are obviously expanding the way we record the data. From my last report to this committee in March, we were building on what we record as complaints going forward, and we're working out new ways, obviously, to report this data to members. And you know, from what Councillor Miles is saying, it would be good for members to know why things were not upheld, equally as to why things were upheld. So you have a balance as to how the process is working overall.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to know whether it's worth having this exercise in the first place. And I think maybe this should come back to this committee to review the actual way it works and maybe amend it or abolish it, depending on what we feel as a committee.
Can I ask Steve to come in here, Lisa?
Yeah, just a quick point. Obviously, Lisa's listening to these concerns, so I'm sure she'll raise these through the corporate complaints group. But I also wanted to add as well that we have agreed an investment in a new IT system as well, so we may be able to get a lot more information out of the system moving forward, and of course we can share that with you in due course as well.
Yeah, it's the response, Steve, that I'm concerned about.
Yeah,
and the inability for people, it appears, to seriously consider a complaint, and the gross inability for anyone to change their mind, really.
Yeah, I get that, Councillor Mann, but I think if Lisa takes these comments away, gives some thought to how we can report on those complaints that are not upheld, and obviously that will give you more information. And if there's a trend emerging of a large number of complaints in a certain area, and they're not being upheld, well, we can share the reasons why with you at that point.
Can I ask them, will that come back to our next committee meeting, or would you need more time?
Well, for the reporting process for the new complaints policy that we adopted on the 1st of April, Chair, we will bring a report in 6 months, so it will be April, May, June, July, September, so probably the October meeting, and it will give us time, obviously, to analyse this 6 months data now that we're collecting, and give me a chance to speak to the complaints officers in all the service areas and explain to them what we need to expand our reports to you to make them far more informative going forward, really, because obviously the Ombudsman likes us to learn from our complaints and, you know, take steps then to ensure that any errors are corrected going forward.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Teresa, you would like to ask a question?
Yeah. Well, Lisa, we've chatted about this previously, and I'm glad that you got a different process in place now from April, because none of the complaints that came in from street lighting actually ended up going to cabinet, which is, you know, if the decision makers don't know that there's a raft of complaints coming in, you know, how are they going to change their minds, you know? And I know they've said that they're going to review at the moment, but you know, previous to that, we met in council, and there was a suggestion that we review it, that's all, and it was shut down. So just before the Senedd election, now that they've decided, you know, they will look at it, but it's the reporting, it's so the volume of complaints will tell you that there's a serious issue. So if if you get one complaint, then maybe it's not a serious issue. But when you get petitions full of names and, you know, individuals writing, and then they're responding to their local councillors, you know, somebody along the line they need to know that these problems are there, and that there is a reporting, there has to be a way of reporting, just like Brenda said, back to the decision makers and say, look, this has become, you know, a huge issue. Perhaps somebody needs to review it, have a look. So I'm glad that there is a different way of reporting, but I am very disappointed that that hasn't been done in the first instance.
It does seem that this committee can't give the assurance that it needs to give to the policy or the corporate complaints policy until something is done to address everyone's concerns. That seems to be the feel. I have one more questioner. Graham Simmons.
Thank you. We're talking about unintended consequences. Well, that can't be the case in the instance of street lighting. You turn the lights off, the streets go dark. That is perfectly obvious. The fact that the public don't like it, it seems they've just got to wear it. Councillor Marsden made a series of 10 pledges on the 19th of November 2019, and number one was that a collective approach will be key to taking the borough forward, and it is vital that the council is the listening authority. Well, as Colin just said, we had 260 complaints that he's aware of. No one of them was upheld. We got taken to court for judicial review over the sports and leisure strategy. You know, you close the leisure centre, kids play in the street. This is not unintended consequence, it's a deliberate acts of policy. And there is no review of that policy.
Yeah, I think on this corporate complaints, for sure, we need assurance, and policies in general. I'm not sure how we'd approach that. I mean, there's so many, I can hardly think we'd have one meeting to discuss it. But there certainly has to be something. I have two more questioners. I don't know who's first, Nigel.
I think Colin and then Brenda.
Okay, thank you.
I won't keep you long, Chair. I mean, obviously, the idea of a corporate complaints and policies, I mean, good organisations learn from complaints. Certainly, as the case in private industry, and they improve by doing it. If this organisation is pretty well ignoring complaints, we're not learning anything. And what should be happening is that we do learn from complaints, and if necessary, we change a policy as a result of that. And it doesn't seem to be happening.
Brenda.
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on what Graham was saying about the street lighting policy and whether that was, the rightness or the wrongness of that policy. The way I'm coming from is not questioning the whole basis of a policy, but let's say, for example, now, so we were starting to get complaints because some people run late night businesses, and just made this up off the top of my head, so it may not be realistic. But let's say there were some complaints coming in to say, oh, like, my business doesn't close until 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're switching off the lights at 12 o'clock, and people are literally falling out of my pub, not through being drunk, but because they can't see the pavement. Maybe if people start to complain about that, maybe the council would want to look again at the policy of switching off street lights where there are late night businesses legitimately operating. So it's that kind of learning that I'm looking for, where like somebody's coming up with something where we would think, oh yeah, actually we never thought that might be an issue, but we can see that is an issue now for businesses. And the nighttime economy. Maybe we want to look again at that particular aspect of what we've done. And like that's the critical thing that I'm thinking of. Like, it is not to overturn a policy, but to think again about the detail of it. That may not be a really good example that I've just given, but that's like an illustration of where I'm coming from.
I would hope that those sort of things would automatically be looked at, especially with businesses and so forth. Anyway, Stephen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously, a number of concerns have been raised today, a number of points have been made. So I think the best way to progress this is for Lisa to take this forward through the complaints group, etc. And when she brings her first progress report through in October, maybe, Lisa, you can include some narrative around how we're going to respond to some of these concerns as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, and obviously expand the report as we can, because it needs to be obviously meaningful, to learn from our complaints and for members to understand, why the complaints have not been upheld, to have some assurances really that we're dealing with those properly as well as the upheld complaints.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Are there any more questions for Lisa now? No? Thank you all for this afternoon. It's been quite a long meeting, but we are at an end now, so I'd like to wish you a very nice evening in the sunshine. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.